When officers stepped into the small Ohio kitchen, they thought they were responding to a simple welfare check. But within seconds, every breath in that room collapsed into silence. A pot simmered on the stove, thick, dark, and strangely aromatic. And when detectives lifted the lid, the truth inside sent one officer running outside to vomit. Because what they found was
Keep your
not
light steady.
food.
What is that?
It looks
It
like a
was a
handbag.
man, a
And these
pastor,
footprints are fresh.
a beloved spiritual father, a husband whose church members had been unknowingly eating him for days. But here's what will shock you even more. This story did not begin in that kitchen. It began decades earlier with a lonely little girl who just wanted to be loved. A girl who grew into a woman who kept choosing the wrong people, ignoring the wrong signs, accepting the wrong kind of love, until the pain inside her became louder than her sanity. So the real question today is this: how does a quiet, gentle church woman transform into the center of one of Ohio's darkest crimes? And would you have seen the red flags, or missed them just like she did? Stay with me. This story is going to shake you.
To understand how a soft-spoken churchwoman could one day serve her husband to an entire congregation, you have to go back to where her story truly began, a small house on the edge of a forgotten Ohio town. She was born into a home that looked normal from the outside: fresh-cut grass, a neat little porch, a mother who smiled for neighbors, and a father who believed silence was strength. But behind that front door lived a childhood stitched together with fear, emptiness, and longing. Her mother was strict, painfully strict. Every mistake, every misstep, every imperfect grade was met with coldness, not correction. Love was earned, not given. Approval was a reward, not a birthright. And her father? He was a shadow in his own home. Distant, tired, worn down by life, offering no warmth, no protection, just a quiet presence that felt more like absence. Imagine growing up in a home where "I'm proud of you" was never said, where hugs were rare, where arguments ended in silence, not solutions. That was her world, a world where she learned early to keep her voice soft, her wants hidden, her emotions locked away. A world where being invisible felt safer than being noticed. Some children grow bold in harsh homes. She grew small. Some become fighters. She became a pleaser. She learned to survive by being agreeable, quiet, obedient. She became the girl who carried everyone's burdens, but had no one to carry hers. And let me ask you something. Have you ever met a person who clings so tightly to love because they never truly felt it growing up? A person who will accept red flags if it means they won't be abandoned again. That was the woman she was becoming, a woman shaped not by violence, but by emotional starvation, a woman who believed that enduring pain was just another form of loyalty. And as she grew older, loneliness became her silent companion. A constant echo in her teenage years, a heavy shadow through her early adulthood. But everything changed the moment she left her childhood home, packed her bags, and stepped onto a bus heading toward Ohio. She thought she was running toward a fresh start. She had no idea she was running straight into the arms of the man who would one day destroy her heart and cost him his life. By the time she reached her teenage years, The emotional cracks from childhood had grown into quiet fractures, small, invisible, but deep enough to shape the rest of her life. In school, she wasn't the loud girl, the funny girl, or the confident girl. She was the one who sat near the window, who spoke only when called upon, who always smiled politely even when she was hurting inside. Teachers described her as sweet, respectful, and no trouble at all. But do you know what that often means? It means a child has learned to shrink themselves to avoid conflict. As she stepped into early adulthood, that pattern followed her like a shadow. She was the type who apologized even when she wasn't wrong. The type who kept giving long after she had nothing left. The type who felt guilty for saying no. She wasn't weak. She was conditioned. Her mother's harshness had taught her to overperform. Her father's silence had taught her not to expect comfort. So she became a young woman who clung desperately to the idea of belonging. At 20, she worked small jobs, cashier, receptionist, assistant, but none of them filled the emptiness she carried. She kept searching for stability, searching for purpose, searching for someone who would finally choose her without conditions. She tried relationships, but each one ended the same way. She gave too much, and the other person took too much. And when it fell apart, she blamed herself. Can you imagine living your life believing that every failure was a reflection of your worth? That every heartbreak was proof that you weren't enough? By the time she was 25, she felt trapped in a loop of emotional exhaustion. So, she made a decision, one that felt bold, brave, and terrifying. She packed 2 suitcases, used her savings, and moved to Toledo, Ohio. No family, no friends, no plan. Just a silent hope that maybe, just maybe, she could rewrite her story. And for the first time, she walked into a place where her past didn't follow her. A new city, a new life, a chance to become someone different. What she didn't know was that this fresh start would lead her right into a church where her voice would finally be heard, and into the arms of a man whose attention felt like a miracle, because she had never truly been seen before. His name was Pastor Elijah, and the first time he spoke to her, he changed her entire world.
When she arrived in Ohio, she didn't come with big dreams or high expectations. She came with quiet hope. Hope for peace, hope for change, hope for a life where she wasn't constantly walking on emotional eggshells. She rented a tiny studio apartment on the east side of town, barely big enough for a bed and a dresser. Her job at a small bakery paid just enough for groceries and rent. But even with long shifts and lonely evenings, she felt something unfamiliar: freedom. Still, the loneliness sat heavy. Days passed where she spoke to no one outside her workplace. Nights passed where she stared at the ceiling, asking herself if this new life was really any different from the old one. Then came Sunday. She walked into a local church, not because she was particularly religious, but because she wanted to hear people sing. Music was the only place her heart didn't feel heavy.
When the Lord
The
blesses
moment
you,
the
you have
choir
to stand
began,
up and
something
testify.
inside her
Amen.
awakened.
Hallelujah.
Their voices
Don't you dare
lifted the
keep
room.
silent.
Harmonies wrapped around her like warm arms she never had growing up. For the first time in months, she smiled. After service, a woman from the choir approached her and said, "You look like you can sing. You should join us." She laughed shyly, insisted she wasn't good enough. But they encouraged her. And the next Sunday, she found herself standing among them, her voice shaking, her hands trembling, but her spirit beginning to bloom. And that is when she met him. At the time, he wasn't Pastor Elijah. He wasn't the charismatic leader the city would eventually know. He was simply Brother Elijah, a respected church brother, kind, charming, always the first to help, always the one people trusted, the one who prayed with sincerity and spoke with calm authority. He wasn't looking for her, but something about her quietness drew him in. After choir rehearsal one evening, he walked toward her with a gentle smile. "You have a beautiful voice," he said. "Not just strong, but honest." She didn't know how to respond. Compliments were foreign to her, especially ones that felt genuine. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely above silence. He introduced himself, asked where she was from, why she moved, how she was adjusting. He didn't pry, but he listened, really listened. And for a woman who grew up in a home where her words fell into empty space, being listened to felt like a miracle. Week after week, their conversations grew like vines, quiet, steady, naturally intertwining. He waited for her after choir practice. He carried her hymn books. He prayed with her after service. He made her feel visible for the first time in her life. And she began looking forward to Sundays, not because of worship, not because of community, but because of him. Before long, the entire church noticed their connection. People whispered that Brother Elijah had finally found someone who could soften him, someone who made him smile more than usual. But she didn't see it as romantic, not at first. To her, he was comfort, safety, validation. He was everything her childhood and adolescence never gave her. What she didn't realize was that this gentle, attentive Brother Elijah would soon rise to a leadership role in the church. And as he climbed up the spiritual ladder, the power he gained began to reveal a different side of him, a side that would one day control her entirely.
For months, their connection grew quietly, so quietly that she didn't even realize she was falling in love. What began as simple conversations after choir rehearsals slowly became the highlight of her week. Brother Elijah had a way of making her feel safe. When he talked, the world around her softened. When he prayed with her, the heaviness she carried since childhood seemed to fade. And when he laughed, she felt something she hadn't felt in years: joy. Their friendship became routine. After choir practice, he'd walk her to the bus stop. On weekends, they'd volunteer together at the church food drive. Some evenings, he'd bring her books, devotionals, and little gifts. Nothing too expensive, just small things that made her feel considered. One night, after rehearsal, he surprised her with hot chocolate from the cafe down the street. They sat on the steps outside the church as snow drifted quietly around them. He asked if she missed home. She told him the truth. There was nothing to miss. He listened deeply. And for the first time, she told someone about her childhood, about her mother's coldness, her father's distance, her loneliness, how she learned to live without being loved. When she finished, he didn't judge. He didn't pull away. He simply placed his hand gently over hers and said, "You deserved better." That moment changed everything. Around the same time, something shifted in the church. The senior pastor fell ill and leadership needed someone to step up. Members looked toward Brother Elijah, not because he was the oldest, but because he had a presence, a voice people trusted, a heart people believed in. He started leading Bible studies. He preached occasional sermons. And with every message, the congregation grew more attached to him. She sat in the choir stand, watching him evolve from a humble brother into a powerful speaker. People praised him. They clapped for him. They said he had a calling from God. But power doesn't change people. It exposes them. As his influence grew, so did his confidence, and confidence quietly bloomed into something sharper: ambition. The shift from friendship to love didn't happen with a kiss or a dramatic confession. It happened slowly, softly, in moments that felt too natural to question. When he started waiting for her outside the bakery after her shifts, when he encouraged her to stop doubting herself, when he told her she was special, when he said he felt God led her to this church for a reason. One evening, after a powerful Sunday service where he delivered his first full sermon, he asked to walk her home. Not to the bus stop this time. Home. They stopped at her door, hearts pounding with emotions neither of them dared to name. And he said it, gently but firmly: "I care about you, more than I should." Her breath caught. No man had ever spoken to her with such sincerity. She whispered, "I care about you too." And that was it. Two broken, searching souls finding comfort in each other's arms. Their dating season was sweet, almost too sweet. He took her to parks, prayer retreats, choir outings, and late-night cafe talks. He told her he wanted a future with her. He made her believe she was finally chosen. But even in the sweetness, shadows lurked. He became protective, then possessive. He wanted to know where she was, who she spoke to, why she didn't answer his calls immediately. At first, she interpreted it as love, because when you grow up craving attention, even control can feel like affection. Then the church board made an announcement that would alter both their lives. Brother Elijah will be ordained as the new pastor. The congregation erupted in celebration, and she smiled proudly, not realizing that the man she fell in love with as a gentle brother would not be the man she would soon marry as a pastor. Because titles change people, and for Elijah, it awakened parts of him she never knew existed.
The early days of their relationship felt like a warm sunrise after years of darkness. He made her feel chosen, visible, cherished, feelings she had never experienced growing up. He remembered her favorite snacks. He held her hand during long walks. He left handwritten notes on her door before work, each one filled with gentle affirmations she never heard as a child. For a woman who spent her life invisible, his attention felt like a healing balm. And for a while, it was. Their dates were simple but purposeful. Picnics under quiet trees, shared devotionals, evenings sitting side by side in church after everyone else had gone home. She started to believe that God Himself had sent her to Ohio just to meet this man. She felt safe. She felt wanted. She felt finally loved. But even the sweetest story carries shadows. The first red flag came softly. One evening, he asked why she talked to a particular male choir member for too long. She laughed it off, thinking he was joking. He wasn't. Then there was the time he asked her to stop wearing certain dresses because they were too distracting for a pastor's future wife. At first, she felt flattered. He cared. But in truth, he was beginning to mold her. He wanted to know her schedule, her friends, her thoughts. He asked questions that didn't feel like questions. They felt like permissions. And every time something bothered him, she reasoned with herself. He loves me. He's just protective. No man has ever cared this much for me. Maybe this is what real love looks like. Because when you grow up believing love must be earned, control can feel like devotion. Possessiveness can feel like attention. Correction can feel like care. He grew more confident as their relationship deepened, more outspoken, more assertive, more entitled. He criticized her friendship subtly, corrected her tone in public, reminded her that as a rising pastor, his image mattered, And her behavior, her dress, her decisions, everything she did reflected on him. Yet she stayed, because the good moments were bright. His prayers over her were tender. His arms around her felt safe. His words made her believe she was finally enough. Besides, every time she tried to confront him, he softened his voice, apologized, held her hands, and said he was only trying to protect what God gave him. And she wanted to believe him. She needed to believe him. She ignored the quiet warnings inside her heart. She ignored the uneasy feeling in her stomach. She ignored the whispers from church mothers who said, "Be careful, my dear. Power changes men." But she had already fallen too deeply. The girl who grew up starved of affection finally found someone who looked at her like she mattered. How could she walk away from that? How could she admit that the man she thought was her blessing might be the beginning of her heartbreak? So she stayed. She loved harder. She devoted herself more. And every red flag she folded into a corner of her heart would one day unfold into the tragedy the entire Ohio community would fearfully whisper about.
It happened on an evening she would replay in her mind for years. A cool Ohio breeze, a quiet church parking lot, and him, holding a small velvet box like it weighed the world. He said all the right words, words that sounded like scripture, words that felt like destiny. And she said yes. Of course she did. How could she not? This was the man who made her finally feel chosen, after a lifetime of feeling invisible. Their proposal became the talk of the congregation. Every Sunday, older women hugged her tighter, whispering blessings. Younger women stared with envy, and she floated somewhere between gratitude and disbelief, because for the first time, her life looked like the life she always imagined. But the universe has a way of warning us before it breaks us, and she had warnings, plenty of them. She noticed how he always needed to be the center of attention, how he corrected her, softly in public and harshly in private, how his future plans never once included any dream of hers. But she told herself, love requires patience. She told herself, no man is perfect. She told herself, God fixes everything. So she swallowed each red flag like communion. When the wedding planning started, the cracks widened. He made every decision. The colors, the music, the food, even her dress. He justified it with scripture, with head of the home, with God told me. And for a moment, she wondered, how can God tell only one person what a wedding should look like? But again, she convinced herself that this was normal, that surrender was holy, that maybe love wasn't supposed to feel comfortable, maybe it was supposed to feel sacrificial. Meanwhile, her mother watched quietly from the corner. Her father asked once, "Are you sure?" Not because he disliked the man, but because he recognized that look in her eyes, the look of a woman trying too hard to be okay. But she brushed them off, and the wedding day grew closer. Decorations hung, invitations sent, choir rehearsing the special song. And yet, every night, she felt something tightening in her chest. Not excitement, not joy, something else. A whisper, a warning, a feeling she would one day wish she had listened to. Before we continue, a quick question for you watching this. Have you ever ignored a red flag simply because you were afraid of starting over? Because that's exactly what she did. And that decision would lead her into a marriage, a ministry, and a nightmare that would shake an entire church to its core. If you're still with me,
Hit the like button. This story is about to take a darker, more chilling turn. The wedding day looked perfect on camera. Smiling faces, flashing lights, her white dress glowing under soft church lighting, a choir singing so beautifully it felt like heaven itself paused to listen. But behind every perfect picture, there's a truth the camera can't capture. As she walked down the aisle, her heart wasn't beating with excitement. It was fluttering with something she didn't yet have a name for. Not fear, not joy, just a quiet unease that settled deep in her bones. Still, she forced her smile, forced her steps, forced her vows. And when the pastor declared them husband and wife, she felt something inside her shift, like a door closing, like a path shutting behind her. Their early marriage began with celebration. Church members brought casseroles, gifts, prayers, and blessings. Everyone adored the couple. Everyone believed they were the picture of Christian love. But the man she married was not the man she thought she was walking toward at the altar. The moment the honeymoon phase faded, he changed. Or maybe she finally saw him clearly. He became strict, authoritative, demanding. Every decision needed his approval. Every opinion of hers needed adjusting. Every question she asked became disrespect. And when he received his official pastoral appointment, everything grew worse. Becoming a pastor gave him a stage, and he used it. Congregations praised him. Women admired him. Church elders invited him. And suddenly, he was never home. Not for dinner, not for prayer, not for her. He traveled for conferences he wasn't even invited to, showing up anyway, calling it networking for the kingdom. But she knew it wasn't about ministry. It was about attention, glory, power. At home, he was distant, cold, easily irritated. In church, he was warm, charismatic, beloved. And she asked herself almost every night, how can a man preach love so well, yet give so little of it at home? She tried to talk to him, but every concern she raised turned into a sermon. Every hurt she expressed became a lecture. Every tear she shed became an opportunity for him to correct her spirit. Bit by bit, she felt herself shrinking, losing pieces of who she was, becoming a shadow in her own marriage, a background character in his story. But here's the part that will matter later. The church didn't see any of this. To them, she was the lucky wife of a rising pastor. To them, she was blessed, chosen, favored. Because people rarely see the darkness behind a man who stands in the light. At first, his trips were short. Overnight conferences, weekend revivals, leadership meetings. But soon, they became longer, more frequent, more suspicious. He would leave on a Thursday and return the following Tuesday, claiming he'd been called to minister elsewhere. Yet he never showed her an itinerary, never showed proof of invitations, never let her accompany him. And when she asked simple questions, just normal questions any wife would ask, he snapped. Stop interrogating me. Respect the anointing. You're becoming a stumbling block. Words meant to silence her. Words meant to keep her in place. Words meant to control. But here's the thing he didn't expect. She was watching. Quietly, closely, carefully. She noticed changes. New cologne she didn't buy. Receipts from cities he claimed he never visited. Late-night calls he hid behind sudden screen locks. And the emotional distance, it grew into a canyon, a gulf so wide she couldn't even recognize the man on the other side. The breaking point came on a Monday night, a night she will never forget. He returned from a conference earlier than expected. Not joyful, not tired, just nervous, like someone carrying a secret too heavy for his pockets. His shirt smelled of perfume, not cologne, perfume, a woman's. She asked him softly, "Are you seeing someone else?" Not yelling, not accusing, just asking. He didn't answer. He didn't deny it. He didn't explain. He simply walked past her, like she was invisible, like her question was noise, and something inside her snapped. Not violently, not angrily, but inwardly, quietly, like the final crack in a glass that's been under pressure for too long. In that moment, she realized he would never choose her. He would never love her the way she loved him, and he would never stop hurting her, not emotionally, not spiritually, not psychologically. For years she had prayed, fastened scriptures to her heart, carried the image of a perfect Christian wife, but the truth was unavoidable now. This man was destroying her, piece by piece, day by day. And the lonelier she felt, the darker her thoughts became. Darkness she was too ashamed to speak. Darkness she feared even God couldn't forgive. Before we move to the next segment, let me ask you something. Have you ever stayed in a situation long after your heart told you to leave, hoping it would get better? If yes, then you understand the dangerous place her mind was drifting toward.
Years of emotional neglect and betrayal had built an invisible prison around her heart. Every trip he took, every lie he told, every secret he kept tightened the walls. She was trapped, alone in a marriage that looked perfect to everyone else, but to her was suffocating. She tried to pray. She tried to reason. She tried to remind herself that she had chosen this life, that she had said, "I do." But the more she tried to hold on, the more the cracks in her mind widened. Sleep became impossible. Food lost its taste. Her reflection in the mirror reminded her of a stranger, quiet, hollow-eyed, broken. And the church, the very community that had once made her feel alive, became a mirror of her failure. Everyone saw a smiling, devoted pastor's wife. No one saw the woman crying alone in the kitchen at 2 a.m. No one heard her silent prayers asking God to make it stop. Isolation became her companion, her thoughts, her confidant. She replayed every betrayal, every broken promise, every lonely night, over and over. And slowly, quietly, a plan began to form. Not one of discussion, not one of leaving, but one that made sense only in her fractured, desperate mind. Because when a person is pushed to the edge, emotionally, spiritually, psychologically, the line between survival and destruction begins to blur. And she began to imagine a world where she could reclaim control at any cost. She remembered every humiliation, every lie, every moment she felt invisible. And in her mind, the answer grew clearer. The pain that had been silent for so long demanded release, and it demanded justice. By now, viewers, you must be asking yourself, how far would someone go if their life felt like it was being erased day by day by the person they loved most? The seeds had been sown, and soon the darkness would no longer be contained within her thoughts. It was ready to spill into reality. The night began like any other. He returned home from another conference, moving through the house with casual confidence, unaware that the woman beside him had been silently counting every lie, every betrayal, every moment of humiliation he had inflicted. She had spent months, maybe years, storing every grievance in the quiet corners of her mind, every glance that made her feel small, every word that reminded her she was beneath him, every night alone in the kitchen, wondering why love always came with chains. Tonight, something inside her shifted. Not gradually, not with warning, it erupted. He dismissed her when she asked a simple question about where he had been. He sneered at her concern, turning it into a lecture about trust and faith. And for the first time, she stopped listening. Hours of careful planning that had been buried beneath her smiles, her prayers, her devotion now surfaced. She moved silently, with precision, a calm that frightened even her. He never saw it coming. The confrontation was brief but intense. Words were exchanged, harsh, cutting, final. Then the act that would forever change the life of the church, the town, and herself. By the time it was over, he was gone. Not by accident, not by chance. And she felt a strange mix of relief and terror. In the stillness afterward, she realized two things. 1, no one would understand why. 2, no one would ever question her again. The woman who had spent her life invisible, ignored, controlled, and humiliated had taken control in the most extreme way imaginable. And the next day, the community would unknowingly participate in the horror she had orchestrated. The nightmare was far from over, but the first irreversible act had been committed. The silence of the house was deafening, the air heavy with secrets that could never be spoken. She knew one thing for certain. The man who had caused her so much pain would never hurt her or anyone else again. And as she moved forward into the chilling reality she had created, the consequences of that night were only just beginning to unfold.
The morning light cut through the windows of the Ohio home, but it brought no warmth. Neighbors expected a normal Sunday. The church expected their pastor to deliver the sermon. The congregation expected the familiar comfort of their spiritual guide. Instead, they were met with absence. Inside the house, the woman moved with mechanical precision. Every trace of the previous night's horror was hidden. The kitchen, spotless. The bedroom, neat. Every shred of evidence carefully removed as if nothing had happened at all. Yet in her chest, the heartbeat of reality pulsed louder than fear. She was alone with the enormity of what she had done, and somewhere beneath the shock, a small, dangerous thrill lingered. As the day went on, whispers began to spread. Calls from church members asking where he was, questions from neighbors who noticed the silence, the first crack in the facade. The woman played the role she had perfected over the years, calm, composed, innocent. She attended church, smiled, prayed aloud, and offered help where needed. No one suspected. No one questioned. At least, not yet. But inside, tension grew. Every smile she forced, every interaction with the congregation, every casual conversation, another test, another reminder that one misstep could reveal everything. And deep down, she knew the truth could not stay buried forever. The pastor's absence became impossible to ignore. Church members began to notice the missing sermons, the unreturned calls, the strange rumors that could not be explained. What would they think if they knew? What would they say if they understood the horrors hidden behind the walls of their beloved church? For now, she remained the perfect wife, the devoted choir member, the smiling presence the community loved. But behind that smile was a storm, a woman balancing on the edge between relief, guilt, and anticipation of discovery. The community had no idea that the most horrifying secret in the church's history was living among them, smiling, praying, and pretending everything was as it had always been. And the question that haunted her, and would soon haunt everyone else, was simple. How long could she keep the truth from coming out? The silence was fragile, the tension was palpable, and the consequences inevitable. Days turned into weeks, and the pastor's absence could no longer be ignored. Calls went unanswered. Church elders began to grow suspicious. Neighbors whispered behind closed doors, and rumors started to swirl through the small Ohio town. The woman continued her routine with chilling calm. She smiled at congregants. She attended services. She prayed with the faithful. No one suspected the darkness lurking just beneath the surface. But secrets have a way of leaking. A missing item, an unusual smell, a careless word spoken in passing, small cracks in the facade that grew larger by the day. Then the authorities arrived. At first, everyone assumed it was a routine investigation, perhaps a missing person, maybe an accident. But when investigators stepped inside the house, the horror became undeniable. The truth, far more grotesque than anyone could imagine, began to unravel. The pastor, her husband, was gone, and the evidence of what had occurred could not be ignored. Church members screamed, neighbors fainted. The community was plunged into disbelief. How could the woman they had trusted, the smiling, praying, devoted wife, be responsible for something so unthinkable? Questions raced through every mind. Had anyone noticed the signs? Could this have been prevented? And most importantly, why? The woman remained eerily calm, her exterior composed. Inside, she carried the weight of her actions and the satisfaction of control finally seized. But even as the world around her collapsed, she understood one terrible truth. Nothing would ever be the same. The church, the town, and her own life, forever altered by a single, unimaginable act. And in the silence that followed, one chilling thought lingered. How could a woman, raised in love-starved isolation and molded by betrayal, cross the line from victim to executioner and live to witness the aftermath? The horror had ended, but the reckoning, the questions, the suspicion, the judgment was only just beginning.
The police investigation swept through the Ohio community like a storm. Detectives combed the house, examining every corner, every surface, every item that could tell the story the woman had tried so desperately to hide. Neighbors were interviewed. Church members were questioned. Every detail of the pastor's disappearance was scrutinized. Yet through it all, she remained composed, her face calm, her voice steady, her answers polite, her grief convincing. But the evidence began to speak louder than her words. Small inconsistencies, traces of activity she hadn't accounted for, items out of place, forensic analysis that could not be argued with. Slowly, the web she had woven began to unravel. Detectives pieced together timelines. Travelogues contradicted his stories. Receipts, digital footprints, and witness statements began painting a picture that only one person could explain. Church members whispered among themselves, unable to believe that the smiling, devoted wife they had admired could be at the center of such horror. Neighbors wondered how the woman they waved to every morning could have harbored such darkness.
And still, she answered every question with practiced calm, her mind sharp, her composure intact, her secrets almost enough to escape the truth. But no plan, no matter how careful, is perfect. No lie can withstand the weight of investigation forever. The detectives were closing in, and soon the full story of betrayal, isolation, and revenge would be revealed not just to the authorities, but to an entire community that had trusted her without question. The mask she wore was slipping, and what she thought she controlled was about to control her.
The day the authorities came for her, the Ohio sun shone brightly, but there was no warmth in the house. She sat in the living room, sipping tea as if it were just another ordinary morning. The knock on the door was sharp, deliberate, and final. When the detectives entered, her calm did not falter. She greeted them politely, offered them a seat, and waited. But inside, her heart was a storm. Years of fear, loneliness, and hidden rage had led to this moment, and now the world was finally catching up to her. Questions were asked, evidence was presented, digital footprints, receipts, conflicting testimonies. She listened, measured, almost detached as her carefully built world began to crumble. Then came the confrontation, the moment where words could no longer shield her. Detectives laid out the timeline, step by step, night by night. Every lie he had told, every betrayal he had committed, every suppressed fear and humiliation she had endured. And as the story unfolded, the weight of her actions hit her. Not just the reality of what she had done, but the reflection of a life pushed to its limits, of a soul forced to take control in the only way she felt she could. She did not scream. She did not cry. She did not resist. Instead, she finally spoke, her voice trembling, raw with a mixture of remorse, exhaustion, and defiance. She confessed everything, every thought, every action, every detail that had been hidden from the world. The community she had once been a part of recoiled in horror. The church that had adored her now stared in disbelief. And she, the woman who had spent her life invisible, became the center of a nightmare she had created, and one she could no longer control. It was over. The silence that followed was heavy, with shock, grief, and unanswered questions. But even in the darkness, one truth remained undeniable. Her story was a tragic testament to the consequences of loneliness, control, and the breaking points of the human heart. For anyone watching this, remember, sometimes the people we trust the most can carry the deepest secrets. Sometimes love, when mixed with betrayal and neglect, can turn into something unrecognizable. And sometimes the quietest hearts carry the loudest storms. If this story shook you, left you speechless, or made your heart ache, subscribe to Crime Vault now, because the world of true crime is dark, disturbing, and more twisted than we can imagine, and you don't want to miss a single story.